A civil war reached its heights in the Patrian continent until the North made some inhuman experiments to turn people into incarnates and change the tide of the battle. Those experiments gave Hank Henriette the power of a godly mythical beast, enabling him to shapeshift into a werewolf and end the war. But as soon as the war ends, the country realizes they won't be able to control someone who has the power of a god. They decide his life holds no more value to them and shoot him with a god-killer bullet. The Civil War started when the Northern Union Patria and the Southern Confederation of Patria discovered a precious mineral called somnium. The Norths were on the losing side until they started using somnium to create the Incarnates. Incarnates are the product born from the research of one individual called Elaine, and soon they were used on the battlefield, dominating the South with their monstrous strength and powers. The North started winning every single skirmish, but something unexpected happened. One of their comrades, Abi the Hydra, starts killing his fellow comrades. Hank, who became the captain of the Incarnates, tries to stop the Snake Man. Abi gets his conscience back for a few seconds and begs Hank to stop him. Before Hank can do anything, the human soldiers start losing their cannons, unleashing steel balls of explosive power against the monster. After the incident, Elaine reveals to Hank and Kane that Abi talked to her about his worsening condition. But Elaine couldn't do anything because she didn't know how to stop it from happening. She explains that Abi incarnate powers were starting to take over him, turning him into a true beast. Hank then gives everyone a speech. He tells they aren't true beasts, they're still human. He reveals what happened to Abi might also happen to them, and before they completely lose their sanity, they, as incarnates themselves, should be put down by their own. A couple of weeks later, the North started marching towards the southern capital, which also costed the squad their members, losing their sanity to the beast inside them, forcing their comrades to put them down. After a long and arduous series of battles, tomorrow at dawn, they're gonna march to the capital. Hank notices his comrades are losing heart and announces that he's going to ask Elaine out, since pretty much everyone in the squad pushes him to be with her, which surprises the squad, as Hank asks them to celebrate it with him once the war is over. Later that night, Hank visits Elaine and she asks him to talk outside. Elaine reveals to him that the war is already over and that the North and the South's already preparing for the peace treaty, except it doesn't include the Incarnates. Even though they are regarded as gods in the battlefield, many people still fear them. And once the war is officially over, the Incarnates are going to get disposed of. Elaine then shoots Hank with a god-killing bullet and tells him that all Incarnates will eventually lose all their humanity to the beast inside them. Once that happens, the Incarnates will be the greatest threat that humanity will ever face, greater than the war itself. Elaine tried so hard to find a way to prevent Incarnates from becoming mindless beasts, but her only solution is to kill her furry comrades before they become a menace to society, especially since she created them in the first place. She also adds that Hank's too kind and gentle. He'll try to stop her, so she has to kill him first before going after the remaining Incarnates. With her is their childhood friend, Kane Madhouse. The two plan to kill the squad tonight, but then something happens. Kane betrays Elaine and shoots her. As Hank's vision fades, he sees Kane laughing before finally losing his consciousness. 2 months later, Hank wakes up in the military hospital. Second Lieutenant Lisa Runcastle tells him that the war is over, the Incarnate squad disbanded, and most of them became insane and was sent off by Kane to go wherever they want. She also tells Hank that Kane and Elaine have been missing since that night. After being betrayed by his childhood friend, Hank goes on a mad quest to slay the remaining Incarnates and find out where Kane is. And so Hank goes hunting, starting with his friend and comrade, Eddie. Eddie tells him that he's a war hero thanks to the power of the Incarnate. But Hank tells him that Incarnates don't have a place in this world, especially if they're going insane and killing people. Hank throws his spear and detonates the bomb attached to it, killing Eddie. A few days later, Hank visits William Bancroft's town to kill him. William Bancroft returns to his town in his dragon form. Although he's been relatively tame compared to Eddie and Abi, Hank has to kill him to prevent him from becoming a threat to the people. While resting in a bar, a girl suddenly bursts into the room and shoots Hank with a rifle. But normal bullets can't easily kill an Incarnate, and so Hank goes after her and takes her away. He interrogates the girl and she reveals that she's John William Bancroft's daughter, Shawl. However, Hank's got someone in mind, Danny, another Incarnate in town, who is his target. He tells Shawl to stay put and goes to confront Danny. Hank faces Danny and tells him of his crimes, which are looting merchants on the roads and pillaging their wagons. Hank asks Danny if he can still remember the oath they swore back then, but Shawl interrupts them and goes between them, trying to stop Hank from killing Danny. Danny transforms into a rhino-like beast and starts attacking Hank. but Hank's already on his shoulders. Hank pierces Danny's chest with his bomb spear, detonating it as soon as he gets off the creature. The bomb explodes, and with Danny's defeat, Hank delivers the final blow. But before he can do that, Danny tells him that he only did that because their town is so poor they couldn't even drink coffee. With his final words heard, Hank shoots him down, finally ending the horrors that merchants experience while traveling roads. Before leaving, Shawl asks him if he's going to kill more of his comrades. Hank answers that they swore an oath. Once someone happens to turn into a beast, they must die. Shawl tries to stop her, but Hank's already made his mind. She then decides to accompany him on his monster hunting quest. A couple of days later, Hank and Shawl arrive in a town that's currently being terrorized by the Minotaur Incarnate. Apparently, the Incarnate creates a fortress made by disassembling the city inhabitants' house, while also telling everyone that the enemy will be coming. There's no better time than now to prepare for war. Lisa informs them that they need to put a stop to the guy, as every citizen will become homeless if he continues to build his fortress. Hank tells Lisa that he's going by nightfall, and once the night arrives, Shawl accompanies him into the fortress entrance. However, while exploring the fortress, Shawl springs a trap, which almost slices her in half, but Hank saves her just in time. She then asks Hank about the Minotaur, and Hank tells her about Theo's backstory. Hank tells Shawl about Theo being a panicky and full of PTSD, which didn't surprise him given how Theo erected such a massive fortress full of traps. Once they reach the entrance, Hank leaves Shawl to face Theo. Hank finally reunites with Theo, and the Incarnate greets him with his usual anxiety over imaginary enemies. Once Hank clears his intentions, Theo transforms into a Minotaur, activating his trap cards. Hank becomes trapped from Theo's barrage of projectiles, and as soon as Theo's about to finish him off, Hank transforms into a werewolf. The Minotaur's traps are no match for Hank's keen senses and insane agility. Once Theo's trap hurls Hank into the air, he uses the elevation to deliver a swift and devastating claw attack that rips through Theo's stone axe and iron armor. With Theo's final words delivered, Hank delivers the final blow, killing his comrade once and for all. A couple of days later, Hank and Shawl travel by train to another town. But before they can proceed, Lisa stops the train and briefs Hank about another Incarnate. Apparently, a benevolent Incarnate called the Behemoth is on a collision course with the recently built Iron Bridge, a connecting bridge between the north and the south. As soon as he knows the details, Hank tells everyone his plan and waits for the Behemoth to arrive. As soon as the Behemoth arrives, they start firing, which disables the monster. The next morning, the same guys who made the bridge start ranting about the Behemoth taking too long to be killed. Shawl also tries to convince Hank not to kill the Behemoth, but then explosions occurred later that night, which enraged the Behemoth up. Hank transforms into werewolf again to stop the raging Incarnate. After a series of attacks, they manage to blow the monster's guts out and trap it. However, the monster still moves, walking as fast as it could toward the bridge. And then, an area collapses from the cliff's edges, revealing the view of the ocean. Apparently, Artie's just a man of few words but longed to see the ocean. As soon as the monster sees the ocean with his own eyes, it falls. A couple of days later, the group arrives in another town being terrorized by another Incarnate. The next day, the group sees the victims of another attack, and one of the kids confesses that he saw what happened last night. Lisa tries to interrogate the kid, but he runs off. Shawl tries to talk to the kid but ends up getting targeted by the Incarnate gargoyle. Once again, Hank arrives just in time to save her. The gargoyle tries to tell Hank that what he's doing is pretty much justice, but a little bit more bloodier than usual. Hank doesn't accept this and the two square off, forcing the gargoyle to flee. Later that night, Hank confronts the gargoyle once again to end him, but the gargoyle shoots him with a god-killer bullet. Hank reverts back to his human form. As soon as Shawl and the kid are about to get absolutely murdered, Hank removes the bullet by force and charges toward the gargoyle, piercing through its chest, killing it. However, Kane arrives and kidnaps Shawl. He tells that Hank must attend their invitation or Shawl will get an Elaine treatment. Hank attends the party, only to end up getting surrounded by Incarnates. The attendees are all nobles and royals from all over the country sympathizing with Kane's cause. But they get turned into a bloody soup as the Incarnates go on a killing spree, murdering everyone. Hank tries to fight off the Incarnates, but he's simply outnumbered. Luckily, a group of soldiers arrive and start shooting the Incarnates. One of the soldiers fires off a cannon at Kane, making a hole in his chest. Hank sees this and harpoons Kane right on the face, detonating the bomb afterward. But Kane's powers fully heals him back up. He then shoots Shawl down, triggering Hank's memories of losing Elaine, his loved one, Those memories make him transform into a giant white wolf, ravaging the town. He then goes missing after literally turning Waitakirch into a mess. A few weeks later, Hank finds himself aimlessly traveling into the frozen mountains somewhere in Patria. After walking a little bit, Hank gets attacked by another incarnate, a werewolf just like him. The werewolf asks him why he declined Kane's proposal and keeps pressuring him to transform into his real form. However, Hank's too weak to do anything, especially after transforming into a massive train wreck. He tries to flee, but the incarnate can smell him from afar. The werewolf charges at him and attacks the tree he's hiding behind, but Hank dodges the attack and manages to shoot the werewolf, who still resists and charges at him, injuring his left shoulder. After Hank's pathetic display of power, the werewolf tells him he'll make him transform and leaves the scene. That night, the werewolf finds Hank in the same spot again and challenges him, but this time around, Hank transforms into his werewolf form and squares off with the beast. The two monsters fight, and as Hank mindlessly attacks the werewolf, he remembers his transformation as the giant white wolf and reverts back to his human form. The werewolf finds Hank's power play super pathetic and decides to throw him at the nearest cliff. He then keeps on stomping Hank's bulky chest, but the same soldiers from the Waitakirch saves Hank. However, Hank falls as the cliff starts to collapse. Hank wakes up on Shaw's lap and she tells him that she went back to her hometown. Shaw tells her that her father, whom Hank previously shot dead, reanimated as a zombified incarnate, so she killed him. After killing her dad, Shaw informs him that somehow she understands why Hank is killing incarnates. Hank talks about his worries and she comforts him. Hank asks Shaw that although they might turn into monsters someday, him included, she shouldn't forget about them. They're still humans and desire to live as one. Hank leaves and sets out to finally kill his friend and comrade, his werewolf in arms. But the wolf's howl pierces Hank's ears, deafening him from his mission. Shaw arrives and shoots the pesky beast, giving Hank the opening he needs to transform back into his werewolf form. The furries fight once again, and with Hank's final blow, another incarnate is laid to rest. A few weeks prior to the final battle, Kane, a couple of remaining incarnates, and their loyalists established the country of New Patria, a separate state where incarnates are pretty much the Olympian gods. With this new threat, the North established a task force to track down Kane and end his madhouse of atrocities. Hank joins this group of soldiers specializing in incarnate extermination, with a little help from Shaw and Lisa. The battalion marches into the fortress and they're immediately greeted with arrows from the centaur incarnate, Miles. Hank transforms into his werewolf form to apprehend Miles, luring him into a trap. But Miles stands up and heals his bullet wounds, quickly fleeing the scene while the soldiers rain bullets on him. The next day, the army readies themselves to start digging trenches. Later, the trench commander signals the attack, and waves upon waves of northern soldiers rush to the fortress to eat iron balls, which is led by Hank. Although the Northmen manage to get to the fortress foot, Miles ambushes them from behind and starts free-firing his arrows, killing the northern soldiers left and right. Miles tries to lure the soldiers away from the main army, but he's heading to a trap. The soldiers trips the centaur and he gets jumped by Hank, who pierces Miles's chest and fires a flare, signaling the commander to bomb his location. Although Miles manages to regrow his limbs, the area suddenly gets covered by pink mist. It was Abai's poison. Hank ends Miles' condition, thus preventing the incarnate from horsing around. But before they can do anything, Kane shows himself and blasts every soldier's heads. Hank senses this and throws his harpoon at Kane, destroying his right arm. He then fires a shot, but Kane turns into mist, only to reappear again. Kane reveals to him that he built a new empire for everyone, for humans and beasts, a utopia where everyone can live in harmony. He tells Hank that humans are deranged creatures and incarnates are born from it. Seeing his friend lost his mind already, Hank transforms into his werewolf form and starts attacking Kane, who has God mode on. Kane creates multiple clones and uses them to attack and wound Hank. The sun shines and Hank turns back into his human form. But Shaw appears and reminds him he's still a human, not a monster, and he still has to fulfill his oath. Seeing Shaw makes Kane memories and rage to kick in, because Elaine loved Hank instead of him. He unleashes his final form and starts going after Shaw, but Hank blocks his attack, megaphones him away, and gives him a nice knuckle sandwich breakfast. After seeing the Irish flag flying over their fortress, Kane flees the scene. With the new threat coming from the west, Hank and Shaw departs on an adventure to find out the magical beasts and kill them before they turn the entire continent into a grand funeral